Apostle Paul tells us that in the ages to come, his plan, his purpose is to show us the exceeding riches of his grace. What I think by that is we don't even know the half of it, how good he is. And it's sort of like beyond our comprehension. But that's right, he is good. And I think we'll all be really surprised when we all get there and find out just how good he really is. In fact, Paul says it'll take the ages to come, not just one age, more than for him to show the exceeding riches of his grace. And that's kind of beyond my power of comprehension, but I know it sounds good. Okay, Matthew's Gospel, chapter 11, verse 28. This is a familiar passage, but one I like, and there's something I want to especially focus on. There's so much in this, actually. There's so many things to focus on, but there's just one thought I want to get today. This is Jesus speaking, 11th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, verse 28. Come unto me, he says, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Notice that a couple of things in this verse before I go and read. Well, let me read the whole thing, then I'll go back. Verse 28 says again, Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. For I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest. Twice now he said that, for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Now, the first thing I want you to notice in this is how personal it is. In verse 28, he says, Come to me. He doesn't say, come to a doctrine, or a philosophy, or a point of view, or any of those kind of things. It's very personal. He says, Come to me. And then he says, all ye that labor and are heavy laden. He's speaking to everyone, because in this world, it's impossible to go through this world without accumulating burdens and problems and difficulties. It's just part of being in the world. But he gives us this invitation, those of us that are heavy laden, those of us that labor and are heavy laden, come to me, he says. And notice he doesn't say, come to me and I'll make it worse. It's bad enough the way it is, but he says, come to me, I'll give you rest. It's interesting, the word that he uses there. I looked up this word before church this morning in the concordance to find out what the word that's used here means. One definition in the dictionary is relief. I'll give you relief, he says. And notice in the next verse, 29, he says, Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart. And then he uses this word again. You shall find rest. Now he's a little more specific. He says, rest for your souls. And that's the part I want to focus on this morning. Sometimes just in our regular talk and our just sort of language, we use soul to refer to the inner person just in general. And it's okay to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. The Bible is a little more specific. In the New Testament, there's two different words that refer to your inner self. Of course, the body is the outside. We know what that is. That's easy to define. But the New Testament actually has two different words, spirit and soul, that refer to the inner self. And they're actually two different Greek words. Of course, the New Testament's translated from the Greek language. That's the language that the ancient manuscripts that we have from the first century and later are written in the Greek language. There's different words translated spirit and soul, and sometimes those two words are used in the same passage. I think Paul wrote in one verse and said, I pray God your whole spirit and soul and body be preserved blameless. And so you could gather from the implication that there's a distinction or a difference. The word spirit is pneuma in the Greek language, but the word for soul is suke. And that's the word that's used here in this verse. He says, Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. I am meek, lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. In the Greek word there is suke, P-S-U-C-H-E. And if you saw it in print, it looks a lot like our English word psyche, from which we get psychology. And this helps us understand what this word is talking about, because if you think about a psychiatrist or a psychologist, to have that word psych, P-S-Y-C-H-E, our English word, that also comes from the Greek language. Psyche, you just have to ask yourself, what is it that the psychiatrist or the psychologist, what is it they study and make their specialty? Then we can understand what it's talking about. Well, the mind and the emotions and the will and that part of us. Our mind and emotions and the decision-making part of our person, and what makes us up who we are. And that's the word that Jesus uses here. Very interesting that that's the word he uses. He said, Come to me, you that labor and are heavy laden, I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, learn of me. I am meek, lowly in heart. And then he says you'll find rest for your suke, or your psyche, or your souls, your mind, and your emotions. And really, in life, that's where we're carrying the burdens. That's where the burdens are carried. We carry them in our mind, in our thinking, in our emotions. Of course, you can't carry burdens physically. You can pick up a heavy weight. But if in your job or something, or just, you're moving some rocks around, you pick up a heavy weight, you can put it down again. But it's a lot harder to put them down once you pick them up in your suke, in your psyche. They tend to stay there. They tend to want to stay there. But Jesus here, it's a beautiful thing. He offers us, he says, I'll give you rest. Or the Webster's Dictionary says relief. I'll give you relief for your suke. And the reason is, he offers to carry for us the burdens that we accumulate and that lodge themselves in us. I like this last verse, verse 30. He says, my yoke is easy. My burden is light. What he's saying is, the yoke, of course, is speaking of that in the old days, that wooden beam that they would put across two animals, hook them together. And so these animals would be yoked together to do farm. I'm saying, I've seen pictures of this. That's how they used to do farm. It's hard. I say farm work is hard enough the way it is today with tractors. But just think if I had to hook up a bunch of animals together, I would just give up. That's too much. But hook a bunch of animals together. But they did that to increase the pulling power, of course. But the other reason I found out from looking into this and studying it, they had another thing they would do with the yoke. Of course, on a farm, they would have animals being born all the time, to replenish the supply. And so some of the animals would be accustomed to, the older animals that were accustomed to, they'd use them year after year after year. They knew how to walk the path and how to pull the plow, and they knew how it all works. They knew how to walk the work, how to do the work, and how to walk the walk. But the younger ones that are just being born, coming along, they didn't know how to do it. And so they would yoke an experienced animal with an inexperienced animal for the purpose of, by yoking them together, the experienced animal, he walks along because he knows how to do it, and the other one he's just kind of walking along with him. He's not really pulling any weight. The other one's pulling all the weight, but the purpose is the younger, the inexperienced animal is learning how to walk the walk, because when the experienced animal takes a step, then the other one takes a step. And I think that's the way Jesus is thinking of it here when he says, take my yoke upon you. In other words, get hooked up with me and walk along with me. And the truth is, he's pulling all the weight if we'll let him. He's willing to pull the weight. That's why he says in verse 30, my yoke is easy. Now, how can he say it's easy? It's because he's pulling all the weight. That's why it's easy, if we'll let him. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. And I think that's a beautiful description of how the Christian life can be, if we will do what he says in the first part of this in verse 28, to come to him. In other words, our attention focused on him. I like, and I never like to leave this without quoting from the Message. I like the way the Message has it. Could you give me that, Phil? He brings out this part about walking. He says, are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me. You'll recover your life. That's a beautiful thought right there. You'll recover your life. That's what he's all about, for us not to take anything away from us, but to recover our life. Help us to recover our life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Listen to this. See, this sounds just like what I described a while ago about the animals. Walk with me. Work with me. Watch how I do it. You almost think that Eugene Peterson, who translated the Message, he must have read the same thing I did about those animals walking, because that's what it sounds like. Watch how I do it. Listen to this. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. That's a beautiful thought. It's not something that's a put on. It's not something that you're forcing. It's something that flows. It's his life. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. He says, I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Another beautiful thought, which this implies to me that he knows us as individuals intimately. He knows everything about us. And he knows what we need in our lives. And he says, I'm not going to lay anything on you that is not fitting to you. So I'm going to lead you and guide you, and you just walk with me, and I know just what you need in your life. Keep company with me, and you'll learn how to live freely and lightly. And that's a beautiful goal, isn't it? Yeah. He wants to give us rest for our psyche, rest for our souls. There's another passage that brings out this very same thought from the Apostle Paul. And Phil, you can go back to King James now. And this is in Colossians chapter 2. And I like the way he says it here. I'm going to read you the King James first, and then I want to get a thought out of the Message translation that I like. In Colossians, Paul's epistle to the Colossians, and chapter 2. And he's writing to the Colossians, and he is expressing to them, well, he's got a lot of things